Project for today is going to be this Didier wood splitter. I'm not actually sure how you pronounce that, but it's got a Briggs Intek engine on it. It's a lot newer engine than what would have originally been on this. It would have been probably an older Briggs & Stratton or Tecumseh on here. Well, I'm not sure what year this is. These are pretty old wood splitters, but it works really good. We've split probably 100 cords of wood on this thing at least. But we quit burning firewood, and then it ended up sitting, as you could see in the first part of the video. I had a tarp over it, and that kind of disintegrated like they usually do. And these were really bad for getting water in the tanks when they sat. I don't know why, what design flaw they had in them on these Briggs Intek engines, but it looks like luckily the tank is dry, so we might not have to take that off. I'll pull the line off of it and we'll rinse it out a little bit to make sure there's nothing stuck down. There's a lot of little corners and stuff in these tanks that can hold moisture and stuff. But I think we're gonna have to go through the carburetor, and then we'll change the oil in it, and we'll check this hydraulic oil just to be sure this isn't full of water or anything. That actually looks pretty clean. I have had a problem in the past with water getting in that, but I think it was a lot of just condensation and old oil. So these don't run a filter on them either. That'd be something that would probably be smart to add on here. So I'll get you set up and we'll get started pulling that carburetor off of there. We'll pull this air cleaner cover off first. That air cleaner looks really good yet. I know I did a service on this probably 5 or 6 years ago, but it didn't get used a heck of a lot after that. And down inside in there, there's a couple of 5/16 bolts. And that pops off of there. I think what I'll do is I'll pull that float bowl off first to see. Maybe we'll get lucky and I won't have to take it all the way off, but I have a feeling we're probably going to have to take it all the way off. The throttle still moves. Those get stuck sometimes when they sit. So I'll pull that float bowl off. It's just a 1/2 inch bolt on the bottom, and then we'll see what we're dealing with. Since the tank was dry, I'm kind of hoping the carburetor was dry, but that can be hit or miss whether that's good or not. Sometimes that makes it corrode more from condensation when they're empty. So in the long term, a dry carburetor can actually be bad. But that's actually, it looks pretty clean. And there's a little bit of junk in there, but not too bad. The biggest thing on these is the needle seat will swell. This one actually seems okay. The float goes up till it's level. If you have it where it's down like that and that's as far as you can put it up, usually that needle seat is swollen, so then it won't let enough fuel in. And the seat is actually, or the needle's actually free, moving back and forth. So this might actually be a fairly easy one. We can just rinse it out a little bit, and I'll pull that fuel line off still, and we'll put a little fuel in the tank and turn the gas on and see what comes out of there. So I'll pull that fuel line off now. I don't know how stuck those are. Sometimes they can. There we go. I know I put a fuel line on not too long ago, so that's still fairly pliable. It's a little bit hard. But you gotta be careful when you're pulling the fuel lines on these. This plastic piece will break off sometimes. I know you can get a replacement that has a little press-in piece on it. It's brass that this goes over, and you can press a new piece in. So I'll get a piece of wire. We'll run up through the middle here, and then we'll also put a piece of wire through. Our gasket there is no good, but we'll put it, there's a hole in the side of this and then in the top, so we'll put a piece of wire through that and run some carb clean through it also. So here I was just showing where you run the wire through there and then through the top here, and then we'll just flush it out with a little bit of carb clean, and then we'll do the same on the carburetor here. I don't know if I can get you in where you can see that right up through here. There's a couple of holes you can run wire through. If they're very dirty at all, you just pretty much just need to pull the carburetor though and go through it, but this one doesn't look too bad, so I'm going to try it this way. I got that. I'll put a little carb clean up through. And I'll spray a little in here too. And I wiped out our float bowl. The float bowl gasket stayed up in there, so I did manage to find a gasket for that. It's a used one, but it was still in good shape compared to the other one. Now I'll get some gas and we'll flush that tank out. So I put some gas in there. Our shutoff must not shut the fuel off all the way because it's dripping a little bit, but we'll run some out of there and make sure there's no water or gunk in there. These do have a filter inside the tank, so they don't have one in line. But we had good flow, and it's looking like it's pretty clean. So I think we're okay there. You'll see the water collect in the bottom if you do have water in the fuel. I think that's okay. I will grab a clamp for that fuel line. I'm not sure why there's not a clamp on there. It could be why the tank was dry if that shutoff wasn't shutting the fuel all the way off. So that part should be good. I think we can put the air cleaner housing back on now. And we'll see if it'll fire up, and once I run it, then I'll change the oil in it. I did leave it sit for a while with the fuel on just to make sure we didn't have any leaks or anything. I usually try to do that on most stuff. Otherwise, sometimes you get it put back together, and once you have the fuel on for 5 to 10 minutes, it'll start leaking. And a lot of times that'll end up getting into the air filter and everything, and it's kind of hard to get them all dried out. I think we're ready to give it a few pulls and see if it'll... Oh, I forgot to put the breather on. That breather hose needs to go. It went like that. It kind of just squishes through. There we go. Now we'll see if it'll fire up. I've got the throttle about halfway. I've got the choke on. I did check the oil in it just to make sure that was good before we fired up too. So far it seems pretty good. Well, it seemed to work pretty good. I'm really shocked actually that that carburetor was that good after sitting that long. I think it probably was sitting there for 3 or 4 years. So now we can change the oil now that we got it warmed up a little bit, and we'll bring it outside and see if I've got a couple pieces of firewood we can try splitting with it. So the drain plug is on there's one on the front and the back of the engine, but the one on the back is easier to drain, so I'm just gonna lift it up so it's tilted backwards quite a bit. And that should give us enough angle. I don't know if I can get a pan under there. So we'll pull this drain plug out of here. The reason I use a crescent wrench on a lot of these square drain plugs is because it's a 3/8 wrench and they're super short, and a lot of times these are really tight, so I use the longer crescent wrench usually just so it's easier to break them loose. Yeah, you get that oil is a little gray. That usually means that it has moisture in it, so it's a good thing we didn't run it too long with that oil in there. I'll let that drain and then we'll top it off with some new 30 weight oil. I think we got it drained plenty. Throw this plug back in. When I put them back in, I do use a regular wrench on them. That way you don't end up over tightening them. In that aluminum, they do seem like they kind of tighten up on their own over time. I'll set it back down to level, and then we can fill it up. So I got it filled up. It holds about around 18 ounces of oil. It was a little more than a half a quart. But I don't know if you can kind of see there's that little bit of white film on top of that oil. And that's some leftover moisture that was in there. That's kind of what water will do on new oil a lot of the time. So usually that will just kind of boil out as it's running, because they run pretty hot. But if you're consistently getting that, especially if you're leaving a machine outside, you want to make sure you change the oil a couple times to get it flushed out. But I think we're ready to pull it outside and see if we can split a couple chunks of wood with it. We'll see if this Arctic Cat Bearcat will fire up. I did a previous video on getting this one going. We'll pull the wood splitter out with this. I've got it outside by a few chunks of oak I had sitting here. These usually don't split too hard, but it'll be a good test for it anyway. I'll see if it'll fire up now that it's out in the cold. I'll let it warm up a little bit and then we'll try it. Well, that ran really good. This isn't quite as long a video as I thought it was going to be. I thought this was going to be a lot more difficult to get going, and you saw the state of it at the beginning in the weeds like it was. I didn't think it would be that easy to get it running. So I think that's going to do it for this one. If you like this sort of thing, like the videos and subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.